Paul W.
Hi, my name's Paul. I'm an alcoholic and an addict. Our stories disclose in a general way what we were like, what happened, and how we are now. And that's what I'm going to try to do tonight, giving each as much equal time as possible. I have a friend who has been instrumental in me getting and staying sober, who lives in another city, but every time we go to a roundup together and go to a speaker meeting, inevitably he leans over to me, if it's going on too long, "Get sober." So I hope I get sober in the right amount of time here. So let me just give you the background here. I am the third of three boys, and my brothers are 8 and 10 years older than me, so I was an oops. And I'll never forget the day my parents told me that, which was encouraging. I grew up in a Southern Baptist family. I was born in a Catholic hospital and delivered by a Jewish doctor. So therapy has been a part of my life as well. I really had what I believe to be a pretty great childhood. My father was a store manager for Firestone for 38 years, so the smell of tires to this day still brings back memories of my childhood. My mother was a stay-at-home mom until I reached about 5th grade, and it was time for her to go back and supplement income. So she worked for USAA for 25 years, which is great for me as a non-military person because now I have the best insurance I could possibly want. The story is that when my mother found out she was pregnant after having 2 boys, my parents were fervently praying for a daughter. Just explains why my parents were very specific going forward. My oldest brother, 10 years older than me, was so excited to have a baby brother. My mother said he lined his friends up at the front door and charged them 10 cents to come see me. I was born at 1:48 in the morning. My middle brother, when he found out he had another brother, promptly went back to sleep. And that's pretty much the way we were raised. Growing up in the Southern Baptist Church and being born in northern Louisiana, as long as we were in those smaller towns and those communities, it was pretty conservative upbringing. But when I was 6 and Dad got transferred to San Antonio, we joined a very big church because Mom and Dad heard they had a lot of great stuff for the youth. What we didn't know at the time was we were joining one of the most progressive Baptist churches at the time. In the 60s, they opened up a home for women alcoholics called the Alpha Home, which still exists today in San Antonio. And they got a lot of flack from the San Antonio Baptist Association because you just don't do that. They're alcoholics. In the 70s, the church developed a counseling program. Well, that's of the devil. No, not at this church, because it was always progressive. And yes, it did have a great youth program. And I thrived, as did my brothers, in this environment. At an early age, I found myself kind of giddy over certain boys in my school. And I found out that wasn't normal, allegedly. Although I had so many female friends. I vividly remember the first girl I kissed in 1st grade, and she ran away. And my parents were so excited, Well, what I found out later is that most gay boys are like this with their female friends, and were scared of the other boys. So, my parents couldn't understand when I came out how that happened. You've always had girlfriends. Yes, Mother, girlfriends. I didn't really start feeling anything was out of ordinary until I got to high school. Now, mind you, my family, there was no alcohol in the house. They were pretty strict Baptist when it comes to that. I didn't ever even taste alcohol as a kid, and because I was trying to be the best little boy in the world, I didn't want to do anything that would make my parents unhappy. The thing about being raised in an appearingly normal home is what I think we all know. There's always something beneath the surface. And my father admitted late in his life that he was not a good father. And I assured him he was correct. But I'm grateful that I resolved my issues with him, which my brothers never did. Something else happened when I was a kid that I knew was different, but I really didn't know how wrong this was. And that is that from the age of 5 until I was 15, off and on, I was sexually abused by a family member. But at the time, I just figured that was normal. But it certainly, as I grew older, has colored my feelings about my self-esteem, about sex, but I'm getting ahead of myself. The day I turned 18 years old, because I was very involved in church choir, I was at a Billy Graham convention at the Astrodome in Houston. The day I was legally allowed to drink. It was 18 back then. There's some irony in that to me. I really had never had a drink until I got to college. And like every good, potentially gay Southern Baptist boy, I went to Baylor. And I wanted to be an architect, but you see, Baylor didn't have an architecture school. And I knew that if I went to Texas or Texas Tech or A&M, I would be tempted by the sin of homosexuality. But if I went to Baylor, I would be safe. Baylor University, where a man-eating tiger got loose and starved to death. My first drunk was New Year's Eve, 79 into 80. Baylor was playing in the Cotton Bowl, and I was in the band, of course. And it was here in Dallas. We stayed, the big Baylor event was at the Anatole, and we were staying at a hotel across the street. Well, I went to the Anatole, and there was champagne, even though it was a Baylor event. And so I thought, well, I'll drink champagne. Okay, your first drunk on champagne, so unattractive and so unhealthy. And I got back over to that hotel across the way and was literally staggering down the hall. And my friends in the band said, well, he's kidding. Everybody knows Paul doesn't drink. In high school in the 70s, everybody was smoking pot. And little Bobby Baptist me grabbed my pearls and went, you're going to hell. So I didn't drink either. But that night I thought, oh, that was kind of fun. Still didn't crave it, but I did have my first drunk. Throughout college, I drank when it was there. I was in a fraternity, and we were famous for having trash can punch, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. And there were nights that I got pretty blottoed. But I never remember feeling like, And for that reason, I knew that I didn't have a problem, that I wasn't an alcoholic, I'm fine, life goes on. After college, I moved to Dallas, got a degree in marketing, and began working in retail because I'm gay. Started off with Sanger Harris and was going to be an executive. And things didn't work out that way. The economy in Texas in the mid-'80s was nasty. And I lost 2 jobs within 3 years' time. So I thought, I'm going to pursue whatever I really want to do, which was to be a performer. But I majored in business to make my father happy. At this point, I'm out on my own, and a friend of mine said, oh, come on, Paul, smoke some pot. And no, I'll go to hell. But I did. I got giggly and hungry and thought, I don't need to do that again. And I didn't. But I thought, if I'm going to bitch about other people doing drugs, I need to at least say I've tried it, right? Because I want to be ethically righteous. A girlfriend of mine, who is still to this day my best female friend, for her 25th birthday, she had a big party, and she was a big cokehead. And so, fine, I'll do coke. I did a line, couldn't tell a gosh darn thing different, and said, I don't need to do that again. New Year's Eve, again, 85 into 86, because it was the mid-'80s, it was the Start Club, it was babies, I decided I would do ecstasy. Now, my friends all that night called me Morticia, because all over the bar, chewing gum 90 miles an hour. The next day, because I had been doing this all night, my muscles hurt so bad, I said, I will never do that again. And I didn't. I kept drinking, and there were times when I got falling down drunk. But in my mind, it was always the result of the fact that it was cheap or somebody else was buying it, because I didn't want to spend the money that it took to drink that much. You see, this is what my brain is telling me. I don't have a problem. I don't drink to get drunk. I drink to be sociable. And then sometimes I find myself at Mardi Gras in New Orleans sitting in a gutter. But I'm not an alcoholic. I had become a pretty successful actor and comedian, having had a 3-man comedy group for 6 years called Less Miserable, which started here, performed in LA, performed in New York, performed in Provincetown. I had found my niche. I had tried to be a studio singer. I had done musicals. I had done theater, but comedy was my thing. And after a great deal of success here, in 1997, I decided to move to New York City because I had 2 mentors up there, one of who is a very successful actress and comedian. She came to see me perform in New York one night, and when it was over, she got right up in my face and in her Brooklyn accent said, "First of all, you're hilarious. Second of all, move." Well, that's all it took. Somebody like that to have that kind of faith in me to get me to move to New York. Oh, by the way, I did come out to my parents, but not until I was 25. And their response was, well, we knew, but we figured until you said it, we could ignore it. Now, if that's not Baptist theology right there, I don't know what is. You know, when I was getting ready for this tonight, I thought, well, this is just like church. I'm going to give my personal testimony tonight. And it is. My parents had a hard time with me being gay at first. My mother told me she hoped that I wasn't gay because she believed that gay people were going to hell. Charming. My father, I was terrified of. But both of them, after thinking about it, sent me separate letters, assuring me of their love. And as my father said, we are going to do our best to understand that which we do not understand. And my parents became a two-person PFLAG chapter. I remember coming home from Baylor one weekend and my parents had liquor in the house. And then I found out they were going country and western dancing on the weekends. I said, I don't want to come home again. You're going to have joined a cult. But see, my parents began questioning everything they'd ever believed. Now, my parents never had a drinking problem. They just took a little bit with them to the country and western place. Big deal. In fact, there is no alcoholism in my direct family. So, why me? My father, in his he died when he was 90 a few years ago, but had become so supportive that he would tell his friends who had something negative to say about homosexuality, he would stop them and say, my son is gay, and I would love for you to educate yourself about this. Because Dad always said, I was afraid because I didn't understand. So, all these blessings, why would I want to mess that up? I moved to New York because I'm going to be a famous comedian or actor or whatever. And for the first 4 years I was in New York, I had amazing experiences. I have met so many famous people. I have hobnobbed with a lot of great friends and people in the business. And truly, I have performed in every major comedy club in New York City. All the while I was working as a legal secretary to keep my rent paid. So, still drinking. I became a big Scotch person. My best friend at the time, sitting right over here, we were both in New York, and it was pretty much inseparable when it came to going to the bars. He would have his Maker's Mark, I would have my Dewar's. But I still never felt like there was a problem. You know, I tried everything, right? And I walked away from it. In 2001, 3 things happened. I turned 40. On that same day, my father had a major heart attack. And then 3 months later, 9/11 hit. And I'm living in New York. Things went south. I also realized I was doing nothing but making money for the lawyers I was working for. Now, let's go back to that childhood trauma I mentioned earlier. My parents were married 70 years. One brother has been married now 41 years, and the other one has been married 39 years. I have never been in a relationship. And I can't figure out why. I couldn't figure out why. Because you see, I didn't respect myself and thought that the only way I could gain respect was physical intimacy. And I put intimacy in air quotes. I've always had an addiction to sex. I'm sure it's from my childhood experience. But living in New York, in 2002, someone offered me something stronger than anything I'd ever tried before. And because I'd had this great track record with trying everything, I thought, no big deal. It was crystal meth. And the first time I did it, I said, well, that's nothing, I don't need it. But the second time I did it, a light went off. And I've heard so many people in AA talk about they took that first drink and they knew that's what they'd been looking for. And when it came to changing the way I felt, that was my story. Within 3 months of using this newfound thing, I had an overdose and had to call an ambulance. I got put in a hospital in Elmhurst, Queens, and I thought I was having a heart attack. And they put me in a psych ward, which I found out after the fact because I was too messed up at the time to know where I was. I must have called home to tell them I was in the hospital. And with HIPAA, they wouldn't tell my family what was going on. My brother got through to a nurse, and he said, wanting to know what was wrong, and the nurse said, he'll be fine, he needs to sleep it off. And my brother called my mother and said, does Paul have a drug problem? And of course my mother, oh, certainly not, because I didn't want anyone to know. But my brother figured it out. The next day after I got out of the hospital, I decided I need to go out and do more of that. Maybe drink a little too. I finally decided I needed to get out of New York before I died. And I was so unhappy. But I'll be damned if I was going to come back to Dallas, because that would have meant I was a failure in New York and I could not face my friends here. Well, I got over that. But you see, my ego is ginormous, as is most of us from what I have found out. But I can only speak for myself. I came back to Dallas to open arms of friends and felt so good. And within 3 weeks, I was changing the way I felt again. Fast forward to 2010, I'd been able to stay completely clean for a few months at a time, maybe sometimes just weeks. Labor Day of 2010, I was in Los Angeles, and a friend had thrown me a cocktail party, and it was one of those nights where the liquor was free. So I kept drinking, and at some point decided I needed to look for something more. And I did. And it was a very bad experience. And I made the decision then and there that I was never going to drink alcohol again. Because if I quit alcohol, I won't do the other stuff. It's controlling it, right? I have not had a drop of alcohol since Labor Day of 2010. And I thought, well, I can quit that cold turkey. I don't need any help. In January of 2011, I kind of overdid the other stuff again and ended up in coronary intensive care at Parkland with atrial fibrillation because my heart rate was over 200 beats a minute. And Sam T. came to see me in the hospital. And he said, Paul, you need help. I don't. No, I quit alcohol on my own. I can do this. Sound familiar? I mean, we got this. I don't have a problem. I had never lost a job. I had never been fired. I'd never lost my home, all of these things. I don't have a problem. But I went to a meeting just to see what it was like. And that was one of the most difficult things I'd ever done because, and here's my head, I'm a celebrity. Everybody knows me. I don't want people seeing me in a meeting. Oh! It was a serious fear. And when I did finally go and I started hearing other people share, I was like, what the hell am I doing here? I don't have these problems. I'm wasting these people's time. I don't need to be here. And so I did it on my own for a while. During a 21-month period of sobriety, something happened to me that changed my life. And that is, I became HIV positive. Now, I came out in 1981. I've lived through all of that, and I knew better. So why? Because I didn't respect myself enough to be careful. But I was sober, so how could it I'd get it if I was high, but I was sober. So I decided I needed to change the way I feel again. And Memorial Day weekend of 2015 was the Big D Roundup at the Anatole. I was very fortunate to be very involved. Many people know that I have an alter ego named Sister Helen Holy, who is my satirical look at the church in which I grew up. Sister Helen did a lot of work at the Big D Roundup that weekend, and it was received so much praise and wonderful, and you're so funny, and that fills my spirit, right? There were these really good-looking guys from LA who were there with some friends of mine who could not stop talking about all the sex they were having at the Roundup. And that triggered me. Paul, people only like you because you're funny. You're not attractive. No one wants you. You have no value. Blah, blah, blah. And when the roundup was over on Monday, I left there and went to a hotel on Stemmons and proceeded to get high for the next 24 hours. This time, it was bad. Not at the time I was using, but in the days following when I stopped. I thought quitting alcohol would keep me from doing the other stuff. They say ABC, alcohol becomes cocaine, alcohol becomes crystal, alcohol becomes crack, whatever. That didn't stop me. And the fact, the medical, chemical fact about that drug is that when you stop taking it, you stop flooding yourself with serotonin. Your body will not make it because it hasn't had to. And as was described to me in the most beautiful way, you lose the ability to experience joy. And that's what happened. And on a Sunday night, May 31st, 2015, I attempted to hang myself in my condo. I didn't want to die. I wanted the pain to stop. I wanted to stop crying. I wanted to stop hurting. Now, I've already said, what a great life, what a great family, great friends, successes. My 50th birthday was at the Meyerson Symphony Center. Now, parenthetically, one of my closest friends was the head of food and beverage there, and he said, if I was the head of food and beverage at a bowling alley, your party would have been in lane 13. I called another friend of mine who's a social worker, a former fraternity brother, and I said, come get me. I told him what happened, what I'd done, and thank God I don't remember my Boy Scout knots. because that's why it didn't work. He took me to Presbyterian, and you mentioned the S word there, suicide, and you go one place, the psych ward. And so I spent the next 4 days on what is affectionately known as Jackson 5, the Jackson Building, 5th floor of Presbyterian Hospital. And they had me in lockdown because I tried to commit suicide. After the second day, again, I was visited by friends in the program and was told, you have a very small window of opportunity right now. It's going to close. But you see, I don't have a problem. I can do this. It was in the psych ward that I had what I call my spiritual experience. I was lying in bed one night staring at a fluorescent light and a popcorn ceiling not unlike this. Now, I had kind of walked away from organized religion, from God, because although I grew up in a progressive church, once I got to Baylor, the rest of the world started telling me, I'm bad. You're not worthy of God's love. So fine, I don't need it. But in that room, I looked at the ceiling and I said, I don't know if there's a God or who's listening, but I need help. I can't do this anymore. I'm tired. And I went to sleep. And the next morning, my social worker came in and told me 3 things. Number 1, your insurance is going to cover rehab. Number 2, I got into the place I wanted to go. Number 3, my law firm job was going to give me FMLA and disability, which was 100% of my salary. Fine. To this day, I have a faith in a higher power that I don't understand. You see, I'd always wanted to know where God sits, what God looks like, how He's controlling, or how it is controlling things, you know? As a child, they said, God is your loving Father, as is your earthly father. I don't like my earthly father. There is an energy or a higher power that follows me around, much like Pigpen's dust cloud does on the Peanuts cartoons. And I don't understand it. But I had that experience in the Jackson 5 of calling out and asking for help, and then too many things falling into place the next day. So I went to rehab near Kerrville, Texas, for a 30-day program. And it was great because it was the only time I was going to be able to fully work a program without anything else distracting me. You know, I've got to be funny. I've got to be a good employee. You know, no, I just sat there and read the big book and started working. Step 1 was probably the most difficult for me because I'm a control freak. And if I admit powerlessness, then that means I can't do something. My father always said, you know, if I didn't make straight A's, are you going to bring that B up? I said, I'm going to try. He said, don't try, do it. There was no failure option. So to admit powerlessness was failure to me. But I had that powerless experience in the hospital. Step 2, came to believe. I was so excited when someone pointed out the action of that statement. I came to believe that it's a process. You know, I needed to do step 1 perfectly. I need to find a way to believe. But I'd already had the results of my prayer being answered. And then made a decision to turn my life over to a power greater than me. That gets in the way of my power. But I was willing to do it. And the best thing that ever happened to me was a man in my rehab who taught a brilliant 4th step class, like a fire and brimstone Baptist preacher. His passion for the 4th step. I can still hear him in my head, when I'm putting all of my resentments. Get angry! Get mad! Just write it all down! And then when I had to come and see where I had done those things, he went, see? But the thing about the 4th step that changed my life was my fear inventory. When I listed 35 to 38 separate fears that I had. And the book says, what is the fear? Well, why do I have this fear? What have I been doing? Where has self-reliance failed me? And those 4 questions on every one of those fears changed my life. Because I realized I'm freaking scared of everything. I'm scared that you will find out I'm not perfect. I'm scared that you will think you will make me a fool. That I will fail. That I'm not attractive. That if I were to ask someone out on a date, they would say no, so I say nothing. See, all these fears have kept me in a hole, basically. I did a 5th step with my sponsor down in rehab, I was set up with by that teacher I had, because he knew us both, and he went, oh, this is going to be a perfect sponsor match. So when I started doing my 5th step, my sponsor down there would sit across from me, sucking on a vape pen, which drove me nuts. And I'd pour my heart out. I wasn't going to hide my resentments. I carried my resentments around in my purse, and I would show you anytime you wanted to see. Look what they did to me. So I'm regurgitating all of this from my 4th step, and he's over there sucking on that vape pen and giggling. Why are you laughing? Because you're just like me. I recognize all of this. No, I'm not. I'm special. It was in coming to these rooms that I was able to let go of the fact that no matter how I thought I had controlled my alcohol use and everything else, I belonged here. The book says, and I'm paraphrasing, no matter how far down the scale we've been, we will see how our experience can help others. And I told someone early on, I'll never tell my story. I don't have these horrible experiences. Really? Just coronary intensive care? But see, that's only hurting me, so that's fine. But I was told that there would be other people out there who thought they didn't have a problem because they didn't have all of these horrible things happen to them, and that I could be that person to them. 5th step, 6th step, 7th step. The 6th step is something I have too much of, which are character defects. And the 7th step is something I don't have enough of, which is humility. The 8th step, I made a list of all of the people that I felt like I had harmed and then went through it with my sponsor here. I had now made it back to Dallas. Oh, yes. I was able to start making an amends. The first 2 to my parents, because they never knew I had a drug problem, and I came clean to them. I never told them what it was because my father loved Google. And if I told him what it was, he would find some things he didn't want to know. So for the rest of the time he was alive, he referred to it as my problem. How's your problem? Fine, Dad. I made an amends to my sweet mother, who I was very close to. Then I apologized for causing her any worry. And before she died, she said to me, keep doing what you're doing and take care of yourself, and that will make me happy. I have sponsored people to keep taking the message. My ego gets in the way there too, because I've had so many sponsees that didn't make it through all 12, or if they did, promptly relapsed. So I'm thinking, well, I'm doing something wrong. I'm not a good sponsor. I'm not living, blah, blah. But here's the truth. I'm flattered that in the introduction, it was said that what I have is the real deal. And maybe it is, but I don't see it that way. I can't do this without whatever is out there guiding me. And I am not working a perfect program. I still have issues in so many areas of my life, but as long as I don't pick up, as long as I don't drink, because you see what I know now is that if I decide I can drink, I can't stop that train that may take me to something else. So I don't drink. So I'm an alcoholic. I'm grateful to have come to these rooms, to have heard my story out of other people's mouths, to have found the opportunity to know that my story, which I thought was not dramatic enough, could help somebody else. And to find that I don't need a big progressive Baptist church in a big city to give me value when I have this congregation in front of me. Thank you.